So in this video, we are going to do a little bit more work on this second structure that shows all of the framing. So the trusses have been added, and in this part, what we are going to do is I'm going to show you how to construct a rough opening for a window. So I'm going to first share with you a chart. So this comes from Andersen Windows. And it's basically one of their lines. They have a number of lines of, different types of finishes and different kind of characteristics for the window types. What we're interested in here is, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. A lot of manufacturers will have charts like this. We're looking for rough openings. So here we have the widths for these casement windows, and we'll get into what that's all about a little bit later. But the important thing about this is the rough openings. So there's a horizontal dimension, and there's also a vertical dimension. Now we're going to be adding an opening to the south face of this. So what I'm going to do is go to that south elevation. And one thing that you'll notice here is we're seeing that front wall, but also the opening that we made in the center wall. And this is a function of basically where the view has been cropped so that we can concentrate just on this elevation. I'm going to go to level 1 and I'm going to click here. So this is going to generate where that elevation, where the kind of cut is. So I guess the front part of it. But what we want to do is scroll down here in this view. And where it says far clipping, I'm going to click where it says no clip. And I'll put clip without a line and say okay. And so what's happening here is I can drag it in just a little bit so that basically what the elevation is going to show is anything from this line to this dashed line right here. So now when I go to the south elevation, I don't see that opening in the back. Now I'm going to go to that the middle section here, and I'm going to look at that window or that door opening between the two sides of the house. So in this one, what we did is we drew a header that basically went all the way from the top of this so-called door opening, or just an opening without a door, all the way up to the top plates. But there's instances where you would have a smaller member here, and you would fill in the top with something called cripples. So I'll go to the textbook and you can see what I'm talking about. So I'm in the textbook, page 179. And what this page is showing, these illustrations are about some of these openings. So I'm going to zoom in a little closer here. Let me get back to where I was. Okay, so zoomed in a little bit. And you can see that this is showing like the full wall with a window opening and a door opening. And this is a kind of enlarged view of a window opening. And in this case, we have a header, which is over the window opening. And then we have these cripple studs or cripples above it. Now, one of the reasons you might use a bigger member is just because this dimension sometimes is very small. But for this part in our Revit work, we will draw these cripple studs. So a couple things to notice here. We have a framing member that goes from plate to plate on the outside here. We have a rough opening width here and a rough opening height here. This inner stud here is referred to as a jack stud, and you can see it's going from the top plate, or from the bottom plate rather, to the underside of the header. This is one on each side. We have a rough sill, which is running across here, and we have some additional framing members underneath the rough sill. Okay, so we're going to construct this. Now, one of the things that we want to think about is like what's the size of this right here? And another thing, let me zoom in a little bit closer. So it says here, so this is a 2x4 wall, and we have 2x6s for our exterior walls so that we can get extra insulation in there. The header is a sandwich of two members around 1/2 inch and around a 1/2 inch wood spacer or plywood spacer. So we have a 2x member here and a 2x member here, and in between the two, there is a spacer. Now, we're going to need to do something slightly different because we have that thicker wall condition. Okay, now, the one that we're going to be using is something that looks more like this, where you have two 2x members that align with the outer faces of the studs. And then there is a kind of spacer member. This is a 2x, not a, a sheet of plywood or something like that, like you might have in a condition like this. So just to kind of have a surface for nailing too. So we'll be, I don't know, we'll get into this detail, but basically this is the kind of concept behind what we're drawing. Okay, so now I'm still in section 1. I'm going to go back to that south elevation so I can begin working on this. And another thing that I wanted to mention is that the size of the header, whether it's a 2x6 or a 2x8 or a 2x10, is dependent on the span. So one rule of thumb is to say, okay, if I'm going to have a window that is as wide as, basically 1, 2, 3, 16-inch spaces between these members, that should come to, let's actually take that measurement. So from here, let's say to here, 310.5. So we'll call that 4. So with a span that is 4 feet wide, the rule of thumb is to add 2 inches. So instead of a header made out of a 2x4, we would be using a header made out of a 2x6, right? If I had a more like a 5.5 foot opening, I would, round up to 2x6 and then add 2. So I would be using a 2x8. So that's kind of the logic behind the whole sizing of the header. So I'm going back to the casement window chart with the rough opening sizes. So for example, if I wanted to put in a window that's 1 foot 6 inches wide, I would basically round up to 2 feet. And then to size my header, obviously wouldn't use a 2x2, a 2x4 would be sufficient for this very small window. Now, if I go a little bit bigger, let's say I'm putting in a 2 foot 6 inch rough opening, a window with a 2 foot 6 inch rough opening, I round it up. There's not really a 2x3 that typically we were going to work with 2x4. So I would round up to 2x6 for that one. So a little complicated. Sometimes you might just oversize it a little bit just to cover yourself. But so for this 2-6 one, a 2x6 would be fine. The same thing goes for the 3 foot one. I could do this one with a 2x6. So that's what we're going to plan. And we can add in the rough openings for, maybe we'll go with, one of these kind of larger windows. So I'm going to focus first on getting that header in place. All right, so back to my Revit project. Now, another thing that you do often when you're kind of putting in window headers is, and I'll go back again to the section here. You often want to align the tops of doors with the tops of the windows, not always, but so this is a good place to start. So if we were going to locate our rough opening to match this, I'm going to measure this right now. And basically coming down to, let's say, the top of the plate here. Let me make sure I'm in the right position. There we go. 6'9 3/8, plus I have my my bottom plate. So when I add 6'9 3/8 plus 1.5 for the bottom plate, I'm going to get 6 feet 10 7/8. So basically that's where I want the bottom of my header to be. Okay, now I'm going to click on this header and let's take a look at some of the settings here. Start level relative to 1 is 7 feet 10 and 1/8. So we will also be considering that. And that's talking about the top. So this is actually the underside of the plate. That may not help us so much. We're going to need to then find out if we put the header at the bottom here and then we add the size of the header, where will that new start level be? And just make note that this is the 4x12 header. And we're going to base our new header on making a copy of that one. So I'm going back to south elevation and I'm going to go to structure, beam. Let me go back there. I don't know what I did wrong here. Oh, I know. I need to be doing this in plan view. Okay, so I'm going to go to my plan view. We'll start it there and then we'll have to do some adjustments in the other view. Okay, so I'm going to work with the 3-foot rough opening, which is, let's see here, let me look at this. It is between, it's a little bit bigger than between these two studs. So I'm going to need to, expand it a little bit. Now, where should you locate it? This is totally up to you. But one thing that we want to do here is I'm going to start the rough opening maybe half a unit in from here. And I'm going to need to get rid of this one. So I'll have a jack stud that sits next to this. Now going back to the textbook illustration, so that rough opening width is here. So since the framing member that I'm going to start with is this vertical one, and I need to put in another one that accounts for this 3-foot rough opening, but I need to add 1.5 inches for the jack stud here and 1.5 inches for this one over here. Okay, so when I add that from one to the next, it should be 3 feet 3 inches. So let's go back to Revit. Right, and I'm going to make a copy of this. And I want this to be 3 feet 4.5 because I need to account for the thickness. And let's just double check my math here. So from this face to this one, 3 feet 3. Okay, that's perfect. That's what I need it to be. Now I'm going to go back to the south elevation so you can see what it looks like. So there's the opening. It's going to be in here. And now I'm ready to construct the beam. So for the header, which is going to be made out of a beam component. So there's my 4x12 header. I'm going to edit the type. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to make a 6 by 6. So it's going to be made up out of 2 by 6s. And my dimensions, going to seem kind of strange for a beam, will be 5 feet or 0 feet, 5.5 inches. Wide. Okay. And now I'm going to draw this beam from my midpoint here. Is it going to let me? Maybe not. To here. Okay, now I don't know where it is. It's probably located at some height that I'm going to have to move it. So I'm going to shift this section marker over here. I'm going to go to that section. And I'm over here at the window, and there it is way down at the bottom here. So I'm going to need to get that up into place. Okay, so if you remember, I did these calculations for that header that's located at the center of the structure. And so we want the bottom of this one to be the same. And so per my calculations, this would put it at, let's see here, start level. We don't want it to be 0. We want this to be 7 feet 4 3/8. Okay, and it's changed. It's now diagonal, and we'll change the end level so it's horizontal again. Okay, so there we have it. And I'm just going to take a quick measurement. The bottom of the header at the center of the structure was 610 7/8, and that's what this one is as well. So now let's go back to the south elevation. And there we have a header. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is, let's go back to the table and let's look at the rough opening height for one of these casements. So let's, all right, so let's say we use a rough opening of 3 feet 6 inches vertically. And so I can go through and kind of make those calculations, and I'm going to need now to create that rough sill. So we have this as a 6x6 header. I'm going to go back to, actually, maybe it's easier to make a copy of this. There's a bunch of ways to do this. You can make a copy and then reassign it a different size member. We could go back to level 1 and do it the same way that we created that header that we were just looking at. If I go to beam here again and I go to edit type and I duplicate and I make 2x6 rough sill and I say okay. Was there? Save again. Okay. I think I have those backwards. I want this to be the horizontal, or the width, and this is going to be the height. Okay, so I will go ahead and actually, we're going to go back to the south elevation. We now have that rough sill ready, but we're going to draw the jack studs first. So I'm going to make a copy of this 1.5 inches over. And if we look at this, we're going to see that the base offset from level 2 is currently set to -1 foot 5 3/4, but I need to bring it down so it sits underneath the header. So I'm going to measure this here. I need to add 11 1/4 inches to that dimension, this one right here. And that should be, okay, so I made a copy of the jack stud here. I may not have included that in the video, but I'll do the other side so that you can see how it's done. Click here, copy, move it over 1.5 inches. And for this one, I'm going to change this level here to -2 feet. Let's see here, -2 feet 5 inches. Okay, so now it's sitting underneath the header. I'll do the same for this one. -2 feet 5. Okay, now I'm ready to add the rough sill. So I'll go back to level 1, to beam, and then I'll draw this in here, and I'll probably need to make some adjustments to it. Going to section 2. There it is below, or I don't want it. And what I'm needing to do is, again, I want to make a rough opening of 3 feet 6 inches. So let's go back to the table. I'm going to make this one right here. Okay, so it's unit number 3036, which is the nominal size for this window, and 3 feet 3 feet 6 inches is the nominal size. And I'll go back to the Revit file and I'll figure out what that rough opening height needs to be. So my math here shows, if this is 6 feet 10 and 7/8, and then I subtract that 3 feet 6 inches, I'm going to end up with 3 feet 4 and 7/8. And that's where I want the top of that rough sill to be. 3 feet 4.875. And copy that into the end level offset. And here we go. Oops. Okay, let's just double check. We want this to be 3 feet 6 inches, and it is. Have one more look at it from the south elevation, and that looks fine. Now we still need to add the cripple studs. So what you want to do is follow, if these are 16 inches on center, you want to follow that same module. So let's make this 16 inches. And in this case, we're going to adjust the base level offset so that it sits here at the top of the header. So I'll take a quick measurement of that from here to, will it take it down to the floor level? I'll just go to here and add what I need. 7.2 and 7/8. And I'm going to add 1.5 inches for the plate to that dimension. So I'm going to get 7 feet 4 3/8. So that's going to be the base level offset from level 1. Oops. Yes. 7 feet 4. And okay, and we need one more in here. Copy 16 inches. Okay, and then this one will fall on the same 16-inch pattern. So we're going to do another one of those for the framing that goes underneath the rough sill. And the other thing I want to do while I'm here is make this adjustment. Let's pull this back so it's sitting inside the jack studs. I'm going to make a copy of this. Again, 16 inches on center. And this one, what we need to do is get the top level offset from up here. So I'm going to take a dimension from right there to, let me to here, 6.0 and a half. And here, level 2 minus 6.5 inches. Oops, 6 feet, 5 inches. And we'll make one more copy. So after you have these done, pick another window opening size and make another window somewhere on this south elevation. You could also, you could copy these and modify them also, but let's see if you can create another window opening using another one of the rough opening sizes from the table that I was just showing you. And I will go back to that table so you can look at the sizes and make your choice. All of them should have the same header height, but the vertical dimension can change, and you want to experiment with one of these other widths. We can go to a smaller header member for these smaller windows, but it's okay if you, instead of doing a 2x6 header, instead of doing a 2x4 header, which you technically could do for these two, you could also just use your same 2x6. We're not talking about a lot of wood, but choose a different height and add at least one more of these in addition to the one that I just shows it as a demonstration. Yeah, so any one of these heights will do. I'm going to make one that's 2 feet wide by maybe 5 feet high, my rough opening. But this particular family of windows or product lines goes all the way to 6 feet, but I'll make mine 5. So in the Revit model, I added this one. It's 2 feet wide by 5 feet high. So I'm just going to double check my dimensions here. 2 feet to the inside, yes. And then same here, 5 feet. Okay, in this case, what I did is I held this side and then began building out. Now your window can be anywhere. It's not necessarily going to fall neatly within the module of the 16-inch spacing. But you'll notice that these members get pretty close, but that's just the nature of, following the rules of the rough opening. So you can add your windows either to level 1 or level 2, doesn't matter, but we want to see them on the south elevation.